Where and when were you born?
That was in Golders Green, 4 Portsdown Avenue, 19th of March 1922.
So your father was an assistant headmaster at Dame Alice Owen School in Islington.
Quite right.
And what was he like? I mean, some headmasters are disciplinarians. Was he a disciplinarian?
He was a disciplinarian, but his charges loved him. They really thought he was one of the fairest, you know. He was...
Right. Firm but fair.
Yeah, firm but fair, that's it. You got it.
Yeah.
Helped me a great deal with all sorts of things. For example, if I wanted the words of a song, mind you, I was only 6 or 7 at the time, he'd play the record over and over again until he got them. I would then say, oh, can I have them in French? He could do all those. He could do French, Spanish, really? German, Italian, yes. And he went to all those places when he was a young man and learning to be a teacher in the holidays, you know, in the school holidays.
So what was your first encounter with jazz, or I suspect I should say hot dance music, probably?
My cousin, who was the same age as myself, he's dead now, but he was given a gramophone when he was only 3 and a bunch of nursery rhyme records, little jobs, you know. He gave them to me. And among them, though, I mentioned his mother, who was a great one for dancing parties and that kind of thing, bought the latest dance tunes, one of them being Yes Sir, That's My Baby, by the Discieland Jazz Band, of course. Ace Brigode, nonetheless, I've still got it. He gave it to me. And funnily enough, my father, although a deputy headmaster, picked up all sorts of popular songs of the time, probably from the boys. And also we had a maid in those days, most people did, and she used to bring in the latest tunes, and I got to know If You Knew Susie, and T for Two, and I Want to Be Happy, and all that sort of thing. And I Miss My Swiss. Oh, that was another one my cousin had too. I loved that.
So even at this early age, were you starting to think about collecting records?
Oh yes, I didn't know any one from another, except they were. I didn't know how they were recorded or anything.
Yeah.
But all I knew was I wanted more and more and more. I wasn't that interested in listening to the radio, although I remember doing so.
You had a particular affection for BBC's own dance band led by Jack Payne.
Yes, it just started.
Yeah, so you regularly listened to their broadcasts.
Wrote them all down too.
What was it about that band in particular that you liked?
I think it must, partly because it was there, I suppose.
Yeah, but it was quite a hot one as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
And Jack, when I got to know him years later...
Yeah, through the BBC.
He admitted he liked that kind of thing.
Right.
But he laughed. He said, I wasn't able to play very much of that on the air. He said they didn't go for jazz, you know.
Did you see the Payne Band live?
Yes.
What's your impression of its stage show?
Absolutely,
what do you remember?
Yes, shattered. That was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen.
So that would have been, what, about 31?
August the 6th, 1931. And I know my father coming home, he said, I've got tickets to go and see Jack Payne. I said, you haven't? Oh, yes. You know, I was full of anticipation.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I remember seeing them, one of the shows they put on in the course of their act was to have an enormous locomotive apparently charging out of the backdrop with the boys sitting all over the engine and on the buffers and everything like that,
wow.
You know.
Doing choo-choo?
Doing choo-choo, yeah.
Yeah.
I reminded Jack of that. Oh, Lord, he said, don't talk about that. He said, that was the most terrifying thing I've ever had to do. He said, the damn thing was wobbling about like anything. He said, I don't suppose you could see that, but he said, I felt completely out of my depth and sort of, unable to balance or anything. He said, I was terrified.
Yeah.
I had to conduct at the same time. He said, the other boys seemed to like it all right, but he said, I was absolutely sort of out of my depth completely.
Where was the theatre that you saw the band play?
The Palladium.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
In the 1930s, moving on slightly, when you were starting to become really interested in collecting records, where would you go and buy them, and how did you gain enough financial resources to pay for them?
Well, that was it. I didn't. Most of the time I looked longingly at the record lists that I collected, and I'd love to have that one and so on, and word went round, and so they spoiled me really rotten. And
you're talking about family?
Yes,
yeah.
And bought them for me at 1 3 each. They didn't mind that. But when I started extending my interest as far as Caruso, when I started saying I'd like some of those, how much were they? 8 and 6. Oh no, no. Forget it.
They're quite unusual bedfellows, opera and jazz. I can't think of many other collectors of jazz who are avid collectors of opera as well. Are you a bit unusual in that respect?
I suppose so. I've never come across anybody else. Plenty of people who are prepared to let me have operatic records that I wanted in exchange for jazz and vice versa. Oh yes. But I didn't have any of that until I got my first ODJB record, you see.
So when did you get your first ODJB record? What sort of year would that have been?
March the 31st, 1936.
You can remember that actually?
Oh yes. It got round the school that I was interested in old records.
Yeah.
And one of my mates there said, well, I know a shop where there's loads of them. I said, oh yes. And he said, well, it's only about a penny or twopence each. I thought, well, I can afford that on sixpence a week. I can get 2 or 3 of those a week if he's got them. I thought, well, he probably won't have anyway. And my chum took me round to this shop. It was only a matter of walking distance from the school. I went to this shop with my mate, and the wrecks of these things, not a cover between them. They're all completely naked, you know. So I went through them and selected about 7 or 8 of them, I think. I only got sixpence. And the old man in the shop said, all right, he said, you take them, I don't want, no, don't argue about that. And one of them was, in fact, at the jazz band ball at Ostrich Walk by the ODJB. And it was pretty well bashed. I mean, it's...
but that was your first encounter with the ODJB?
Yes, it was. I'd never heard of them.
And your initial impression of them was?
This is it. This is it. I've got. If they make any more records, I've got to have them somehow. And I saw to it that I did.
And you never lost your admiration for them?
No. One of these days, I said, I wonder if they're all still alive. Of course, they were playing too. That's 1936, having been revived, as it were. And I made a point of. Well, I make a point of no, because it actually happened by accident. Travelling in the New York subway with Walter Allen, he nudged me and said, look over there. He said, see that guy by the door? I said, yes. And he was sitting there with a bass drum and several little bags sort of hanging on it, you know.
So that was Tony
Sbarbaro.
Yeah.
He said, that's Tony Sbarbaro. I said, no, is it really? And I looked again, I said, yes, I suppose it is. He was very much fatter and a little heavier built than his photographs showed.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Walter went over to him and introduced himself and called me over, you see. And he said, well, Tony he's a fan of yours. And Tony looked up rather grumpily, but as soon as he realised what I was there for, his face beamed and he said, glad to see you. And he said, you're from London, huh? So I said, yes. And he said, I was there way back, but he said, I'll tell you something. He said, the guys there, he said, they treat you like you were real. He said, not here. He said, they treat you out of your last cent.
You were talking about your school days and about acquiring records while you were at school.
Oh, yeah.
I also heard that, I don't know if this is true or not, but some of your school friends would sort of purloin records from their family's collections for you?
Oh yes, like hell they did.
In exchange for remuneration?
Cigarette cards or anything else that they happen to want, yes.
Right,
I mean, I always had a plentiful supply of those, again from my good friend the doctor next door, who was an inveterate smoker, and he smoked the right kind of cigarettes, players.
Oh, to get you the cards
that I wanted, you see. Right. I like players' cards best, because they seem to have more interesting subjects on them.
When was it that you first heard classic jazz as played by Jelly Roll Morton or King Oliver?
Well, I first heard what is a classic, of course, is West End Blues by Louis. And I used to listen every Friday lunchtime, because I came home from school in time for lunch, you see, to Christopher Stone, giving the latest records every Friday at 1 o'clock on 2LO. And one of the things he played was a record by a band I'd never heard of, and that was West End Blues, Louis Armstrong's Hot 5. I thought that was wonderful. He used to get them before they were issued, you see. He also, and I've still got the program that I wrote down, played the Cumming records, which he'd managed to get from America. And he talked about these OK records, and I thought, what are they? I wonder what they look like. And I even drew what I thought the OK label looked like. I drew a tree with little acorns hanging on it, and the rest of the label, the title and the composer and everything all laid out as I imagined it would be.
Yeah.
When I met him and told him this years later, he was in fits. He said, it doesn't say much for my pronunciation, does it?
At the time we were referring to, moving on to the late 30s, there were very few reference books on jazz available. There was Charles Delaunay's Hot Discography, which I think was published first in 36.
36, that's right, yeah.
But apart from that, there was little information available about classic jazz recordings. When you started listening to 1920s classic recordings by the likes of Jelly Roll Morton and King Oliver, was this lack of information on sidemen and recording dates a constant source of frustration?
In a way, yes, but by the time I got to hear them, first time I heard King Oliver, Differmouth Blues, was when Spike Hughes played it on the air on the last day of 1937. And I thought, this is a wonderful record. This is it. This is the same sort of idiom as the ODJB and all the rest of them I'd learned to like. Many of them I knew by name because I'd seen them in the catalogues, you see. I had no idea what they were like. And I saw the name of Jelly Roll Morton, Black Bottom Stomp and the Chant, which was the only one in the catalogue. I thought, I wonder what that's like. It looks as though it might be interesting. Mind you, I was 17 or 18 years old then. And by a stroke of luck, I managed to get hold of, into the good books, as it were, of an established collector who had a spare copy of it. And I had junked some really good jazz records. I didn't want to let him go particularly, but he was interested. So I thought, oh, what the heck, I want that record. It's supposed to be good. I read a bit about it because there was Collector's Corner was going in the member then. And I got it because I wasn't disappointed. He sent it to me, and that was probably the first box of really good jazz records I ever received from anybody.
Unlike Delaunay, you never lost your admiration for the white pioneers of jazz, especially the ODJB. In fact, you became personal friends with its nominal leader, Nick LaRocca, and corresponded with him for many years. And in many articles, you've unstintingly championed the ODJB and their music. Did you, or indeed do you feel that the likes of Nick LaRocca and the ODJB were as crucial to the development of early jazz as, say, someone like Sidney Bechet or Louis Armstrong?
Oh yes, in their own particular way, they certainly were.
What do you mean by in their own particular way?
Well, they were, I don't know whether they were just lucky or what, I think there must be a certain amount of luck involved in it, because as Nick himself told me, Harry James, the promoter, not the band leader, heard them when he was on a trip to New Orleans and noticed the audience's reaction to them and thought they would do just nicely to put them as a novelty act in his club in Chicago. So he engaged them. And of course the rest is history.
So these were in the days when jazz was still regarded very much as a novelty?
Oh yes, and he hadn't even got a name then.
Do you think that at the time that was because they were white, that they were given that opportunity, or...?
No, I think it was because they were something new that caught the public fancy.
But do you think there were other black bands playing a similar style of music, or were they unique?
They were unique, I'm quite convinced, because if there were, I always have argued this with loads of people. I don't think I've ever convinced any of them, but at least I think that had there been any black bands, we've got black bands the same in the earlier periods on record. They don't sound anything like the ODJB, not in the slightest. Having heard the Europe Society Orchestra records, I mean, they might just as well be Joseph C. Smith.
That's not to say that there were black bands, say, in New Orleans that were not playing in a style...
They were playing ragtime, I think.
Yeah, but they must have been playing blues inflections as well.
Oh yes, I think they probably were. They took the blues, and I think Nick would be the first to admit that, because that was the thing that people wanted to hear and to dance to. And he played blues, after all, which were composed by black composers.
Yeah, like Handy.
Handy and Spencer Williams and people like that. And Tom Delaney, of course, who wrote Jazz Me Blues.
So what's your attitude then to those researchers and jazz commentators, critics, etc., that dismiss the ODJB as being a sort of poor imitation of black-derived music?
Well, putting it bluntly, they're just simply shutting their eyes to the facts of history, I think. There was nothing like the ODJB that sounded like them in the years before. I mean, there were ragtime bands, mostly sounding like military bands or theatre orchestras. You
don't just think it is a case that those black bands didn't record? I mean, for instance, what do you think about the theory that the cornetist Freddie Keppard and the original Creoles were to have recorded and didn't because they said that if they had have done, their music would have been stolen.
I doubt it was worth stealing, quite frankly, having heard some of them. I mean, after all, the pioneers of that are from New Orleans that lived long enough to make records, eventually.
You mean like Bunk Johnson?
Bunk Johnson, Kid Rena, I mean, they're appalling, I think, quite frankly. I mean, if they didn't play any better than that in 1912 than they did in 1942 or whatever it was, well, I'm not surprised it didn't become popular. At least you can't lay the criticism about the ODJB that they didn't play in tune. They always did. Spot on the note all the time. And I don't know if there was anything due to training necessarily, because most of them, none of them could read, except Edwards.
What about talking about the development of jazz after the ODJB, where you get the coming to prominence of the jazz soloist? That was predominantly a black musician that was developing that, such as Armstrong, Bechet, and slightly later Hawkins. La Rocca wasn't a strong soloist in that respect, was he?
No, he wasn't. None of them were particularly strong solos. Their idea was to play breaks. When they did have a solo, it was a matter of a bar or two break, as we know from the records. And their ensemble work was what fitted all the pieces together, like a jigsaw.
Apart from the ODJB, are there any other bands of that time or near that time that reached the sort of zenith that they achieved in that respect?
There are various other bands that have got the right idea, but they didn't achieve anything like the popularity that the ODJB did. The New Orleans Rhythm Kings, of course, and the New Orleans Jazz Band with Jimmy Durante, people like that. They're very good, but they're not. They hadn't quite got the message.
Is it the swing or the interplay or a combination?
I don't know what it is. All I know is that this may be a point. There are 3 sessions for Jeanette by the NORK, aren't there?
Yeah.
The second one, the first to be known as the New Orleans Rhythm Kings, is by a 5-piece band with exactly the same instrumentation as the ODJB. But although they'd had 5 years of studying the records of the band, they still hadn't quite got it. They're loose sort of colours, rather, in a way. Rapolo was great, but he didn't have much support from the others. Even Bruni's, at that time, wasn't what he became afterwards. He seems to be faltering. He doesn't seem to know quite. He's feeling his way. That's the impression I get.
And what about the Louisiana Five?
Well, I never cared much for them. They except for that one title, Slow and Easy, they need a cornet. They need a cornet to lead them. As it was, they had to rely on Nunez to lead them. He wasn't a strong enough leader. I suppose if he'd been Boyd Center or something, blasting the life out of his instrument and wrecking reed after reed, well, maybe, but what a horrible thought.
So when you listen to the ODJB, you don't think that they're feeling their way? They've already arrived?
They've already arrived, yes. Yeah. And the public knew they'd already arrived, and they loved them for it.
Yeah, all right.
Those records show me what the ODJB was really like at the height of its career, at the height of its creative powers, and they were considerable, as we know.
But why did the band not continue with Columbia when they only recorded one record? What happened after that with their first recording?
They didn't like it, and they didn't like the dealing with Columbia, because Columbia didn't seem to know quite what they were on about. And Columbia insisted on doing Darktown Strutters in Indiana, neither of which, said Nick, were our numbers.
And they were badly balanced.
Yes, they were. He said,
comparison with the Victors.
We went to Victor, he said, more because we didn't like Columbia's treatment of us. But he said, we went to Aeolian and Vocalion he called them, and he said they were better. They let us play naturally where we could hear each other playing. With Columbia we couldn't. And he said, but Victor took endless pains to make sure we got the right sound.
Who was the recording engineer at Victor that recorded them?
Raymond Soy, S-O-Y.
He did a pretty good job.
Oh yes, he was the one who strung the wires across the ceiling to absorb the extra overtones, you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise you get a sort of
an echo
effect, a sort of tinny sort of sound.
Yeah. The Vocalions are nice as well, though.
Oh yes, they were recorded in a very large hall. They've got that peculiar depth echo sound.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
And But they were used to recording by then. They'd made that one date for Victor. The test date for Columbia, they didn't like it a bit.
How did they come to get the contract or get the initial recording date for Columbia? Did Columbia just approach them and ask them?
Columbia approached them, and they
while they were at the restaurant in New York?
In Rising Brothers, yes.
Yeah.
And they didn't record them on the first occasion they met. And because there's a famous story of the carpenters who slung their tools about when they were building a rack or something in the next door room, the office next door. And Nick, of course, thought this was an insult, which it was, of course. Anyway, they didn't like the idea of Columbia at all. And Victor offered them a contract to record then and there on the spot. Right. No nonsense and no messing about. And they had everything ready and they got on with it. And then along came Vocalion. Then again, you see, they couldn't be played on any kind of machine. And Nick felt that was not going to do the band's name much good, you see. And records are supposed to be spreading their name in the far corners of the States, and all over the world if need be. Then, of course, Victor came back to them and said, well, look, boys, what about another session? And so they gave him one. And then more, and then they got a contract, which Eddie Edwards saw to, you see.
Yes, being the business manager.
Yeah. He did he arranged the Vocalion dates too. But the Vocalion dates were only for 6 months, and they played that out and they did them, and that was it.
And the contract to go to England was they were approached by de Corville?
Yes, de Corville got them to come over, and also placed them in Rector's. My parents saw and heard the ODJB in the Palladium.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And they were most impressed by their antics rather than their music, which they thought was a noise.
I think the thing about the ODJB is that they also realised the value of show business and how to put across.
Larry Shields doing a little dance, holding up his coattails.
Thing with sugar and...
that sort of thing, like and sharing a mute like Edwards and Morocco did and so on. And of course, the little doll on the cymbal, on the teddy bear.
Moving on a bit to the likes of King Oliver, who's another pioneer that you've researched, as with the ODJB, and whose records you've collected all your adult life. What's your view of LaRocca's assertion, as far as I know, that he made that the likes of Oliver and black musicians stole his music?
He didn't. He never told me that, and I asked him. He said, no, we were something new, he said, and the black boys played ragtime. He said, and there is a difference. And but he said, I never had anything against them. He said, we didn't hang around listening to them. We didn't have to. We had our own kind of music we were putting over. And he said, I've always listened I said, I think the world of Armstrong. And all those guys the black guys that have taken this music and taken it far. Those were his very words.
So do you think, therefore, that, say, for instance, when Oliver is playing professionally in, what, about 14 or 15, isn't he? Is he playing something quite different from the Oliver that you hear in 23, then?
I would think so. Because, after all, there's a good deal of difference between the Oliver at 23 and the Oliver at 29. Oliver was one who I believe he believed in moving with the times and starting out a new line, maybe. If only we had some records of what he sounded like, say, in 1920.
Or even earlier.
Or even earlier, yes.
Do you think that LaRocca became a bitter person?
He was embittered, I think, because a lot of musicians that he considered to be rather second-rate were given priority and so on. But he didn't name anybody. He wouldn't say who he thought they were.
Okay.
And he said, these guys that came after us, and I imitate his voice.
Yeah.
He said, a lot of them, they just died in the gutters. I remember thinking there's a wonderful way of putting it.
So why did LaRocca give up music in, 25, and go back to New Orleans to take up building contracting or whatever it was that he did?
Why he did so?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it may have been he fell out with the other members of the band, or they were taking over jobs that he didn't care to do, that kind of thing, and he didn't feel it was worth it.
There was a band that didn't always see eye to eye in terms of the individual musicians, wasn't it?
Yes, so they did. I think he felt, I think, always that Edwards was trying to push him out of the limelight. And he said he formed the band. Edwards didn't.
Yeah.
Edwards was the business manager. He arranged the recording sessions and signed the contracts.
Why do you think that Dixieland Jazz, as played by the likes of the ODJB at the time, and it spread rapidly across the Western world at least, by the early 20s, suddenly fell from grace to be replaced in popularity by larger, straighter dance bands as typified by Paul Whiteman?
Well, I think it was, there again, it was the showmanship. Whiteman was a showman after all, let's face it. He wasn't much of a violinist. He was all right, but he wasn't much, he never got by on the strength of his violin playing. But he was a showman, and he knew what musicians he wanted and how to arrange. He knew what Ferde Grofé could do for arranging, and put all these various pieces together and built up an empire, you might say, getting bigger and bigger by the year. And also he realised that that was what people wanted as a change. Most people did anyway. And I think partly because of that, because also, you see, the ODJB were out of the country when Whiteman got started up. When they came back, Whiteman was just starting on records, and he'd been playing in California for some time before that. And then he came east and got a job at the in Atlantic City, I think, wasn't it? And by that time, of course, the ODJB came back and got started again. But then it was that seeing the popularity of Whiteman with his 3 or 4 saxophones, as well as 3 brass and all the rest of it, and the violins, Victor insisted that the ODJB have a saxophone added to mellow them a bit, you see.
Wasn't that Kruger?
That was Kruger, yes. And Nick said, he said, we just put up with him. He was there. He said he knew what he had to do, and he tried to do it, but he said he got in our way, as we know.
Well, of course, the other problem is that some of the dances that were used to dance to the ODJB, for instance, the shimmy, were regarded as fairly lewd and licentious, weren't they?
Oh, yes.
And I think that may have been a problem, because also at the time you see accounts of jazz being described as lewd and low down and the devil's music and
that's it.
And this sort of all this sort of thing. So
all these rather lurid stories of preachers in the pulpit condemning it, and and those who followed it were treading the path to hell and all that kind of thing.
So as somebody who's written a book on dance music, specifically, you wrote a book called The Dance Bands. What do you think, and also being a lover of Dixieland and other forms of jazz, what do you think that the dance bands brought to popular music that you like and admire?
Probably, I think when they gave their soloists a chance to take a solo, solo, they're the ones I'd go for most, and I think they were also welcomed by a large number of dancers and people people who were just listening. It was something new, it was something extra. Instead of having the same old instruments en masse, playing the same tune over and over and over again until the end of the record, until the end of that dance set or whatever it was, it must have got terribly boring. But if you give them something a bit different, like a hot solo, or even hot ensembles, as many of them did, after all, the Dorsey brothers, you get that, and you get it with Ted Weems and all sorts of other bands. Oh yes, it was something different. It was something, again, it was a fashionable thing, if you like, but a very worthwhile one.
When you left school in 1940, you worked as a bank clerk, but I can't imagine that you harboured a desire to become a bank clerk. I didn't. So why that profession?
I harboured no desire to become a bank clerk, but I did harbour a desire to get away from school, at any cost. I would have taken any job, I think, to get away from school, earn some money, and buy some records with the proceeds. That was that's all I wanted.
During the war, you were a member of the Auxiliary Fire Service?
Oh yes, by night and in the bank by day. I remember buying my ration of chocolate one day at a shop on the corner opposite the branch of the bank. They moved me to the Law Courts branch of the bank in the Strand, Fleet Street, and there was a sweet shop just opposite, and I got my ration there. And Buzz Bomb came over that night, and that was the end of the shop. I think I must have been one of their last customers.
So can you recall any specific incidences of unusual circumstances of finding choice records during the war?
Oh yes. one particular occasion was again during the buzz bomb raids of 1944, in June 44. I went to a shop in Seven Sisters Road, which is, where is that, in Hornsey, is it? Somewhere like, it's North London anyway. And there was a shop there, and I saw they'd got some records that had been brought in for salvage. And I said, can I have a look at those? And the girl said yes. And I found Victors and American Columbias by the Louisiana 5 and all sorts of good things. Boyd's Centre and his Centipedes, which isn't too bad, on Victor. And oh, that's amazing, I'm really in luck. And the manager said, what's all this going on? So I said, well, can I trade some of these records that you've been brought in for salvage for some of mine that I've got here for salvage? No. They've been brought in for salvage and they've got to go for salvage. I said, yes, I know that, but I said, yeah, some of them aren't really salvageable. I said, now take these Victors. I said, they're not English records. And I said, and there's Columbias, which are laminated. You can't salvage those.
Them, yeah.
No. I said, all right. Never mind. I said, I'll buy some records from the shelf, if you like, and put those in the salvage without even playing them. No. See, this gentleman, Miss whatever her name was, and off he went. She said, that's all right. She said, here you are. and she gave me about 8 records, and I gave her 8 worn out, what they were, Dick Rhodes, Sandy Powell, or something, whatever they were.
Something that deserved to be salvaged.
Oh yeah, they were completely finished. They'd been given to me, you see, for rubbish.
Yeah.
And the dustman brought them, that was it.
Oh,
That's how I got quite a lot of rubbish. The dustman brought them round, you see. And
knowing that you might be interested in old records.
And sometimes I was.
Yeah.
You know, Red G&T's of Caruso.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to refuse those. Dustman or no dustman.
Yeah.
Mother didn't approve of it, of course, but you don't know where they've been. I said, no, but I know where they're going. Right into my racks. Anyway, I got these records, and another time, I was looking through records in my own local shop. I've been friendly with the manager for years. He was quite happy for me to do the trading of old stuff that I didn't want, the stuff that I did. And one landed right outside, smashed the windows in the front of the shop, clouds of dust on top of everything. I was covered with dust as well, but I got down behind this pile of records. I heard this thing coming down, and I think they probably saved me.
Wow.
Otherwise I'd been blown over and blown to pieces, I don't know. But the records themselves stood firm.
No wonder you like shellac.
Yeah. Oh yes. And oh yes, I remember the Louisiana 5 on Columbia, American Columbia, of Alcoholic Blues. I'd never heard them, but I heard of them. On the operatic side, I found Edouard de Resky, the legendary baritone singer, and all sorts of other names.
You continued then to work for the bank as well during the war?
Yes, and when the war was over, I thought, well, I had enough. They called a meeting of all the young uncovenanted clerks. There was a temporary measure of people, you see, which included me, of course. And they explained what their future held if they stayed in the bank. And I thought, no way, not if I got anything to do with it. So I knew, because she'd already written to me and had some correspondence and invited me round for research purposes to see the library. Valentine Britton, who used to be in the foreign records department of HMV in Oxford Street. And before the war, she was the first person to show me a Victor record to see what it was like. It was Boyd's Centre, again. And there was an Ellington there. And I looked at my mother and I said, oh, that'd be nice, I'd like to buy that. How much is it? Oh, she's there, 4 and 6pence. No, said my mother, no way, can't afford it. You think we're made of money now your father's gone? So I said, no, all right, never mind. I've got them since, of course, but probably a good deal more expensive than 4 and 6pence.
Yeah.
Anyway, she was the librarian by then.
At the BBC?
At the BBC.
Yeah.
So I went up there and I said, thank you for letting me see the records a couple of years ago. Oh, well, I remember you were coming into the shop. So when I worked there, so I said, well, I'd like to work here. Oh, would you? Well, I know you know quite a bit about records. I said, well, yes, something about the older ones anyway. Well, she said, it happens we've got a vacancy, but she said, I'll have to have some words with the head of the department. And within 6 weeks I was in there.
Excellent. So that must have been like going from hell to going to heaven then?
Yeah, it was. And that was exactly how the head of the department put it to me. he was nice, jovial sort of fella. And he said, well, he said, how are you getting on? So I said, fine. I said, this is exactly what I've always dreamed of doing. Oh, well, he said, keep it going. He said, you'll be all right. A couple of weeks later, he had a heart attack, and that was it. He was gone. And his replacement didn't like me at all. She thought that I was out to undermine her position, I think. And also the classic example of how much she knew about our kind of music. One of the producers said, it occurs to me, he said, a program we should put on is it's just 5 years since Glenn Miller disappeared. We could do a program on him. She gazed at him through rather watery sort of eyes and said, Glenn Miller, who's he? So my friend, the producer, took a deep breath and he explained who Glenn Miller was. Oh, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And then, of course, talked to her about Thomas Beecham and Adrian Bolt and
different kettle
all that sort of thing. Yes, she knew her stuff, but when it came to anything else, she didn't like the fact that I fraternised quite openly and easily with everybody who came in and wanted to know about these things. She couldn't do that, but I could. And there were more people coming in to do that than there were coming in to do the long hair stuff anyway. Well, I mean, there was everybody from Edmundo Ross to Gracie Fields to
dance band leaders.
The dance, oh yes, Jack Jackson and even Harry Seacombe, people like that. They came in and I helped them, you see. Can you think of a good record that would fit in here?
Oh, I see, right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'd say, yes, well, have you heard so-and-so? No, you got that here. I said, well, have a look. And I'd say, yes, we have, here it is. And he said, well, let's make a pile of them. He said, and I'll go and listen to them, and I'll pick them over and see what I think of it.
Right.
He came out and he said, that was great, thanks very much. He said, well, I said, well, that's right, what I'm here for.
So was that while working at the BBC that you had your initial idea for compiling a discography of jazz records?
Yes, I think it must have been, because by then I'd got Deloney, the 1940 edition, which I thought was right as far as it went, but it didn't go nearly far enough for me. Very few matrix numbers, virtually no recording dates, and everything lumped together under one artist's name. And, oh no, this isn't the way to do it. Then I'd got Orrin Blackstone's Index to Jazz. That wasn't much better. It was a tiny little print and rather amateurish looking. And of course, by then there was, by 1950, there was Jazz Directory. And I got all those as they came out. And then they ground to a halt. And I think the last one was when? 1952, was it, or 53? But by then, I realised an ambition to go to America and look for records there and meet the musicians.
Right.
I did both.
I'm going to come on to America in a minute, but I just wanted to ask you that while you're at the BBC, you're talking about meeting people like Jack Jackson, for instance. So a lot of these musicians that you met at the BBC also, you sought their help in terms of their recordings.
Oh, yes.
And recordings of other people.
Yes, and they were very helpful and only too willing to help.
And it was Jackson who, and I think Sid Phillips that first mentioned the great trumpet player Sylvester Holler, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And so how did you, I mean, he must have been one of the sort of key studio sidemen, at least recording in England.
Oh, yes.
He must have been a discographer's dream, as he kept a detailed diary.
He was, absolutely, and such a nice guy too. And
when did you first meet him? How did you come to meet him, or find out even where he lived?
Well, a friend of mine who's now dead, in New York. I've been trading with him for some years.
Who was that?
It was Bob Mantler. And I said, look, I wrote to him. I said, look, I particularly want to find Sylvester Holler if he's still alive. Who? Sort of thing, you know. I said, well, he was over here for many years, or 3 or 4 years. I said, he made lots of records. And I said, I think he did. I said, because the same trumpet seems to come up on some of them. So many. Behind all sorts of vocalists, as well as in bands and things. And I said, I wonder if he could help, if he's just still around. So my friend said, Bob Mantler went to the New York Public Library, got out all the phone books he could find, and eventually found him. Gave me his address, and I wrote to him. And back as soon as by return, almost, came Hooley's letter. Yes, I was there. I was guilty, my lord, sort of thing. It's great fun stuff.
Yeah, great sense of humour.
Oh, yes. And he said, I'll send you a list of, well, he said, I'll send you a list of what I made. He said, I've got my old diaries. He said, At least you'll know that you've got the right dates and the right bands and so on. And he had. He just simply typed them all out for me on sheaves and sheaves of paper. They kept on arriving, you know. And he eventually, after, when was this? It was 1960, 61. I decided I'd go over again. And I told him I was coming over and could I meet him? And he said, yeah, not only you can meet me, he said, but you come and stay with me. He said, we'll have ourselves a ball with some records I've got here. And my goodness, he had too.
Yes, he had a good collection.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's how it got started.
Didn't he greet you at the airport?
Yeah.
With a fanfare?
Yeah. I thought, but what is he? Royalty couldn't ask for more.
And there were other musicians that helped you in the early days of when you were starting to compile information. Nat Starr was another one.
Nat Starr I never met, but I met his widow.
Right.
And she gave me all his diaries. I've still got them there.
And Chappie D'Amato.
Chappie D'Amato, well, yes. Yes, he came in to do a series of programs.
Yeah.
And because they were the lighter side of music, they were given to me to deal with, you see. That was the way it worked.
Ted Heath was another one.
Ted Heath was, yes, ideal.
He told you a rather funny story about early studio recording.
Oh, yes, rather. He did. He said, I was a member of Stanton Greening's band.
Stanton Greening's, yeah.
He said, we were due to make records for the old Imperial label. He said, you know those, of course. I said, oh, yes. I said, Greening's Dance Orchestra. And he said, well, he always looked so terribly melancholy.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Yeah, that sort of hang-drawn expression, yeah.
You met him too, did you?
No, I never met him.
Well, he did, and but he's got a sense of humour, all right. And he said, we went along to this studio. It was on the top floor of a building in Farringdon Road. And he said, it was a blazing hot summer day, and we went up there, and he said, we were shown into the studio, and he said all the curtains were draped round the windows to keep the sound of the Farringdon Road traffic out. And he said there was a great horn. He said we had to play into that. And he said some of us were sitting on high stools and standing on boxes and so on. And
the acoustic recording.
Yes.
Course, yeah.
And he said, I was told I wasn't to hit the man in front of me with the slide of my horn. He said, so he said it wasn't easy at all. He said we managed it somehow. And he said when it was all over, he said the engineer came creeping out of his cubicle where he'd been recording, at least we thought he had, and he was very unsteady. He said, I'm sorry, boys. He said, I forgot to put the customer on the wax. We'll have to do them all again. He was smashed out of his mind. Ted's imitation of a drunk. It was quite something. And he said, we felt we could smash his black.
I was going to say, they must have hated him.
Yeah. He said, but there's nothing for it. He said, we were contracted to do these 8 sides in one session. He said, imagine doing 8 sides a session now.
Yeah.
He said, we'd have the union down on us. Yeah.
In 1960, you left the BBC to concentrate on compiling the first edition of Jazz Records and other freelance work. Wasn't it a bit of a financial risk to leave the stability of the BBC? Well,
yes and no. After all, I felt that I got about as far as I could get, as far as they wanted to allow me to get. And that being so, I thought, well, I wonder if I dare try it out on my own. So Mary and I had a fireside chat one night. She said, look, if you want to go out on your own, it'd be the best thing you could do. She said, I'll be with you. Now, I couldn't have asked more from anybody than that. Especially as we'd only been married 5 years then.
Sure.
No, 6 years. And we had a young child. And I thought, well, I'll go for it. She said, you've got your books to write. She said, they're wanted. Because I sent out some propaganda already to say the book was coming. And anyone interested, please write in. Yeah. Send money when asked, sort of thing. I put the book out, as you know, loose leaf one. Pretty much a shambles, but I did put it out. And that was a sort of springboard. I took off from there.
Did you publish it yourself?
Yes.
Did your training as a librarian influence the layout of your discographies?
No, not really. No, I thought, I know how I want this to be.
Right.
I wanted to look something like Jazz Directory's layout, but better. And fewer unknowns and see this and see that and refer to something else.
Right.
I want to put as much together as possible. Otherwise this is going on into about 12 volumes and nobody will be able to afford them.
Obviously you had help from musicians and also in terms of matrix numbers, your own collection and other collections,
Yeah.
the BBC, etc. Did you also gain access to recording companies' catalogues and ledgers?
Yes.
Did you have help from the librarians, for instance, at EMI and RCA?
And RCA, yes, with open arms. They couldn't have been better and nicer. And the same with CBS. Oh yes, they treated me like a visiting royal prince or something. With Decca were quite different.
Really?
They wouldn't they wouldn't even open the door. They'd alone slam it in my face.
You mean the American Decca or
Yeah,
British?
American Decca.
Yeah.
English Decca were exactly the opposite.
Right.
They were like Victor and Columbia in New York were.
But what about EMI?
EMI were much the same as Decca in America.
Really?
Yes, they were very suspicious. Oh yes, and their librarian said, was very doubtful about the whole thing. He didn't like a bit of it, gruff and...
You did eventually sort of get in at EMI, didn't you?
Oh yes.
But
Oh yes, I thought, I'm not going to take this from some underling, which is the way I thought of him. I'm going to the top. So I wrote to the chairman of EMI. I explained what I wanted, and why I wanted it. I said, and this information will be of interest to people all over the world, and I said, it will probably enhance the sales of records and that sort of thing. It will call, those are reissued, and it'll bring into being further reissues, which will sell well.
Yeah.
The people know what they're getting because they've read the books and so on. And the chairman sent back a letter, personally signed. Yes, by all means, come and be welcome. Show this letter to whoever it may concern, and that sort of thing, So I did, and I showed it to this chap who'd been so damned rude. Oh, it's you here again, is it? Oh well, come on this way then. I thought, oh yes, roll out the red plush carpet, it won't cost you anything,
Yeah.
Anyway, he was very offhand, but the actual he was the head of the department, the archives. He introduced me as the librarian, who was a middle-aged lady, and she was a little bit suspicious, but I explained what I wanted, and I showed her the chairman's letter, and she mollified, of course, and she said, well, yes, she said, we've got all the old catalogues and old ledgers. She said, do you really want to see them all? I said, yes, please, as early as you can, and as near as, near the present day, say up to 1940, up to the war. Oh, yes, she said, that's what I mean. She said, well, make what notes you like, he said, but and be sure and return them to someone of my staff when you're through. Well, so I couldn't do it all in one day, naturally. I must have gone back about a dozen times and got quite friendly with them, they were nice people there, fellas and girls there.
It's one thing to go to large companies like EMI or Victor where they hold quite a bit of information, but how on earth did you find out information about the recording dates, etc., of very small companies, recording companies?
Oh, that's another story. Of course, most of I think all of their files have long since gone the way of all flesh, or all paper, except Jeanette, because their files are intact, as you know. But the others, I've had to rely on the knowledge of when the things were issued,
Other collectors,
surviving musicians.
Just talking about other collectors, are these very early dates, say the mid-40s to mid-50s, who were some of the American collectors that you got in contact with then? Who were the first ones?
Oh, the first one, believe it or not, was a girl. And what on earth was her name? I haven't heard of her for 50 years. Marguerite Baldwin. And I think she lived in the Midwest somewhere, but she seemed to know her stuff, and she provided me with records and details of records. And then there were others who, though not interested in jazz, they were interested in Hawaiian guitar records, organ records, military band records, things like that. And of course I could supply these by the stack, and did. And they found the jazz I wanted, and that provided me with the information.
Swapping information. And Walter C. Allen was one of the...
Walter Allen wrote to me very early on, and we pooled our resources, and because he could get at the surviving musicians, and I'd already found a lot of things in recording ledgers and so on, and we put them all together and produced the book on Oliver. And he and I went junking the first time I went to the States in 51. And
when was it you went? 51?
October 51. And just as the shops were closing, we found one junk shop in Newark, New Jersey. And we found some records outside, a little trestle table, you know. And I took them in and I said, well, how much are these? And the fellow looked at us and suddenly slapped him. He said, hey, he said, you're from England, aren't you? So I said, yeah. He said, I'm from Huddersfield. I've been here since 1907. So I said, oh, great. I said, well, you still sound like a good Yorkshireman. Oh, aye, he said, it doesn't leave me. I've never forgotten that. And he said, you want these records? I said, well, yes. Oh, he said, take them with my love and best wishes.
So did you find much in terms of rare jazz records junking in America? In
the eastern side, no. Midwest and south, yes. New Orleans, plenty. There's one shop place I went to, I heard was being sold to some other, was being or refurbished or even pulled down. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but anyway, the owners were going and they were turfing out everything they didn't want, and that meant records.
That was in New Orleans?
Yeah, on Germain Street. And, they got everything there. They got Bogus, Ben Covington and Pinetop Smith and Charlie Patton and Flying Blake with Dodds and without, and all sorts of blues things on Paramount, Stexon and OKs, and so I more or less took the lot.
So how did you get them back? I mean, you didn't cart them around on your back, did you?
No, I didn't. I wrapped them up in my used clothing, much to my mother's horror when it came back, and I put them in a box, which I got from my host, and I packed them up well and posted them off to myself. Right. And they arrived soon after I did when I got home. And
in the first trip in '51, did you also go to meet musicians?
Oh, yes.
And who did you meet?
In '51 I met Tony Barbaro, as I told you.
Yeah.
And I heard him play, because he said, well, be my guest, come along to the Stuyvesant. He said, well, I'm playing there tonight, that's why I've got the drum with me. And, I said, yes, of course. He said, I don't know who will be there. He said, just the guys turned up and we don't know who's going to be there. But he said, well, actually there were some quite good people. There was Bobby Hackett was there, and Lou McGarrity and Bob McCracken. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was introduced to Bud Freeman. Walter Allen knew him, introduced me to him. And when I came from England, he said, my dear old chap, he said, very nice to meet you, by gad. He said, I'm very, very fond of England, you know.
Because he was, wasn't he? I mean, he lived here for a while.
Yes, oh yes.
And when did you meet Baby Dodds, for instance?
Baby Dodds, I met him in '51. I went down to New Orleans, and because I got in contact with Bill Russell. Of course, he knew everybody.
Sure.
And he said, well, we're going to see Baby Dodds tonight. Oh, I said, that'd be nice, great. But is he happy to see people and be interviewed and talk to them? Said, yes, he said, of course he is. He said, so that was in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we went along there, and Bill didn't say anything. He just let me talk to Baby Dodds and let Baby Dodds talk to me. And he was very nice, very easy to talk to.
Did he talk about his brother?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He said, I wonder if you realise, he said, you probably do, but he said, he made one record with Joe Oliver. He said, but he never got label credits for it or anything like that, but he was playing on half the record. So I said, I better know which one that was. He smiled and he said, it's Someday Sweetheart. He said, yeah. He said, but not the Brunswick one. I said, was there another one? Sure there was. When we made was the band, when we were with Louis in the band. I said, you made one? I said, what was that? And he laughed, he said, I don't know, he was one of the Jeanettes, I guess. When I saw the Jeanette files years later, because there it was. His memory was great, though.
Yeah.
And he told me how he'd, when Jelly wanted him to play on the Red Hot Peppers date in '27, he wanted for Jungle Blues a particularly loud gong. And he said, I searched all over the music shops in Chicago trying to find one that sounded exactly as Jelly wanted it. He said, I did find it. He said, there's this huge brass gong. He said, with Chinese carvings all over it. He said, it didn't cost that much, but he said, it was a heck of a thing to carry through the streets. So he said, but that's what you can hear on the record.
You also met Louis Armstrong briefly in a car park, I think.
Yeah, in a car park outside the Olympia, in Earl's Court in London. And I'd asked his manager if I could talk to him.
Yeah.
And again he said, oh yes. And Louis came out and he shook hands and he said, well, he said it was then getting nearly midnight. He had two shots on the stage already, 2 appearances, long ones. And he said, do you mind if I get in my car and we talk through the window? He said, I'm a little bit tired, but he said, I told my manager that I'd see you. He said, so what do you want to know? So I talked to him about all sorts of things, and I told him what I was doing about writing a book on jazz and so on. Well, he said, if I can help, yeah, but sure I will. I said, well, there's one thing that's been collectors like myself have been arguing about for a long time. Whose band was it that made I Miss My Swiss? Do you remember it? He laughed. He said, yeah, sure, I remember that one. I said, was that Fletcher Henderson's band, or was it Sam Lanning? They're trying to tell me you played with Sam Lanning on some records, and that was it. Oh, that was one of them. Louis, he stopped smiling. He said, no. He said, I didn't make no records with Sam Lanning. I played sometimes in the Roseland, but he said, there was no records with Lanning. No, that's Smack's band. That's Fletcher Henderson's band. He corrected himself. Oh yes, I said, I know. I said, I thought it was. Oh, he said, yeah, I remember that one. Oh, and he laughed. He said, yeah, that was a kind of a fun thing. Yeah, we had a ball doing that one.
Talking about sidemen who played in Henderson's band, it's a task that is achievable to find out who played in these sort of bands. But when you start to talk about establishing the personnel of studio bands that may change on a weekly, if not a daily basis, how on earth do you go about establishing the personnel of studio bands?
Well, the only way to work out the sidemen of a studio band is just to familiarise myself with what they sounded like, the regular ones that is, and check with as many of their employers, as you might say, like Ben Sylvan and Nat Shilkrit, and I met both of them, and they were most helpful.
So is there a degree of guesswork involved?
To some extent, yes. And of course, I don't know whether you knew this, but in Melody Maker, Edgar Jackson used to give details of personnel of these bands. How right they were, I think he must have been right most of the time, because I think he too checked with them at the time. And of course, sometimes not so much the leaders, and I would also talk to the individuals themselves as many as I could.
You also met Diva Taylor.
Yeah.
And what was her reaction when you played some of the Clarence Williams sides to her?
Oh, it reduced her to tears. Yes, I took it off. I said, oh, Eva, I'm sorry. I said, I should have known that you wouldn't want it. Oh, no, she said, it isn't that. She said, it just is the memory, you know, that she said, I love the records, but she said, I guess I have to be in the right mood to hear them. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. No, don't worry, honey, it's okay, don't worry. And she was awfully sweet. But the other thing I remember most about her was the fact that two things. She loved singing, and she sang with John R.T.'s accompaniment at one time. And the other occasion was when, after walking around London, seeing all the various things she wanted to see, I was due to call a taxi, thinking to spare her any further walking. I was game for it, but I didn't think she was. I thought she was nearly 80. And as soon as the taxi drew up, he saw her, swiveled round and went off in the opposite direction. And I said, Eva, what's the matter with that guy? I said, I hailed him. She said, don't worry. She said, this happens all the time in the States. And I understood.
And Annette Hanshaw you met in the States?
Yes.
And,
yes.
And she was a bit reticent initially about wanting to discuss her recording.
Very reticent. That's putting it mildly, Nick. She hated them. She really hated them. She said, oh, there's awful old records.
Especially when you mentioned the pseudonyms that were used.
Oh yes, she laughed about those. But when I said one of them was issued on a record label which was produced entirely for a department store in London, Selfridges, as it was known as a Key Records. And I said, But they didn't call you Annette Hanshaw, they called you Ethel Bingham. She rocked with laughter. Oh no, she said, not Ethel Bingham. I said, that was the name they put on the label. I said, Lila Sanford. Well, she said, that's not too bad, but don't mind that so much.
She was by that stage a stenographer or something,
Yes.
wasn't she? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So did she warm to wanting to discuss the records in the end? Yeah.
As soon as I played her one or two,
Yeah.
and I talked to her about them and showed that I was absolutely 100%
Yeah.
genuine, that I wasn't just another publicity seeker. I really wanted to know what she was like, what she remembered, what she could tell me.
Wasn't it Willard Robertson that introduced you to her, or did she introduce you to him?
She introduced me to him,
Right, okay.
and we had dinner together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was something I did.
Sure, yeah.
She was, yes, he was very nice too. But,
Yeah.
his memory was shaky though. I couldn't get much out of him. I didn't try very hard. He simply remembered certain records which I knew about.
With Annette Hanshaw, she had fond memories of people like Eddie Lang,
Oh yes.
but not so fond memories of Tommy Dorsey.
No, definitely not. No, because that was the occasion when they were both in the accompanying orchestra at OK, and the studio assistant that issued the cue sheets and the music, I suppose, too, for each musician. He issued the wrong ones to the various musicians.
Yeah.
They all came in most appalling noise. Each playing each other wrong notes and that sort of thing, and right notes according to what rate was written in front of them. It shouldn't have been there. It should have, and she said, I was up at the microphone, she said, I burst into tears because she said, I thought they were going to fire me or something, and she said, I was only 19. And she said, I was terrified. And Eddie Lane came over and soothed me and told me not to worry and everything was going to be all right. And he went over to Tommy Dorsey and said, don't you understand? He said, some guy's given us the wrong music, there's nothing more to it than that. Tommy, come on. And
Well, I think he was a bit of a firebrand, wasn't he?
Tommy Dorsey?
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. Absolute perfectionist. You've got to be like that or else, you know?
I've heard that Jack Payne was regarded as a bit of a firebrand as well. As a
Martin,
leader.
I think the word.
Yeah.
Yes, I think he was.
Didn't get on with Jack Jackson.
No, I don't think he did.
No. I mean, Jackson apparently threatened to ram his trumpet down his throat if he didn't leave Chaffee Tomato alone. Did you ever meet Bechet when he was here?
No.
But you saw him?
Oh, I saw him, yes.
Yeah.
That was an experience and a half.
At the
Winter Garden.
Winter Garden, sorry, yes.
With Humph.
What was he like live compared to on record?
Exactly the same. Majestic.
Vibrant.
Living.
Powerful.
Powerful, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't need no microphone.
No, yeah. So he was as loud as they say as well.
Oh, yes. But tasteful.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. I mean, he was a master of everything he surveyed. Wally Fawkes pretended to snap his clarinet across his knee.
Yeah.
When after Bechet played a particularly wonderful solo, I forget what the number was now. Was it Weary Blues? Anyway, whatever it was was a clarinet anyway. And as soon as the number was finished and Bechet had written the whole lot out to the most thrilling climax, he put the clarinet down. Wally Fawkes picked it up and went to go like that. I've never forgotten that.